I wanted to help change his mind for the good of his listeners and the good of his legacy because it is so aggressively and obviously risky to me. I had to say something for the good of all listeners. But in the comments of George's original video, a listener commented that George was clearly talking about financial independence, retire early, and that I misrepresented the video when I called Dave Ramsey. And George said he did not misrepresent it. He was intentionally malicious, which is even worse. And I was going to let that go unsaid. I responded. If you go to that comment, you can see that I asked George for his forgiveness and said that I wanted to move forward, putting the notion of maliciousness behind us. I didn't want to continue going back and forth in a way that would be detrimental to our respective reputations. And I wouldn't even be talking about that one particular comment if it weren't for this interview with George Kamel that was done by Graham, Stefan, and Jack. Graham and Jack have a podcast called The Iced Coffee Hour. This is one of the most popular financial podcasts right now that you can find anywhere. And I heard that George responded to the 8% stuff more directly than anything that we've seen up to this point. I was excited. This is what George had to say in his answers.
No, Dave was under fire recently for 8% withdrawal rate. What do you think about that? Do you think 8% withdrawal rate is fine? Do you think that could be a good benchmark for people when they're trying to retire?
I think there's certain situations where that would be totally fine.
George is right in saying that there are some situations where the 8% withdrawal rate would not be detrimental, where it could work out. One example would be someone who's retiring so late in life that their time horizon is short enough that 8% doesn't put them at risk for burning through their nest egg.
You follow the Ramsey plan and you have a giant nest egg and that's your plan, then that's sustainable. If you look at real numbers, hypothetically, like this is all, it's like your $1 billion question. Would you get $1 billion and do this? The realistic numbers are if you had $2 million in retirement and you were withdrawing 8%, you would be okay with a paid for house, money in the bank, and you would adjust. And Dave said on the show with Rachel.
Before we hear what Dave said on the show with Rachel, I'm disappointed that George says if you look at it realistically, because I feel like we have.
Rachel was like, well, hey, what if the return that year was 10% instead of 12? You go, well, you could take it down to 6%. But the key here is being flexible with your spending in retirement.
Okay, that's not what Dave said on the show. What Dave said on the show in response to Rachel was, say we wanted to be more conservative and we think our investments are going to make less on the whole. Dave's like, well, then take 10 minus 4 equals 6. That's fine, but why are you going to underinvest? He didn't say that's what you do in a down year.
Go a 10% rate of return. Go a little bit more conservative with your rate of return. Go 10%. What would you do with 10%?
Well, then 4 off of that, so 6.
6, yeah.
But why are you going to underinvest?
What I think George is doing right here is he's walking the line between disagreeing with Dave and trying to recognize potential information that contradicts Dave. It's very political.
So in retirement, if you're going, I need 12 grand to sustain this or else it's all going to fall apart, you've already failed. So the amount of people who are actually having to live this out is probably slim to none.
All right, I disagree. I don't think that the number of Dave's listeners who are going to need to intentionally implement a safe withdrawal rate strategy intentionally are slim to none. That's just not the case. What reality we need to recognize is the ones that are represented in the risk zone graphs that I shared with you. And the fact that people aren't on average saving enough for retirement in order to have flexibility. On top of that, there's also the fact that many of us have a goal of wanting to maintain consistent buying power in retirement. We don't want to move it up and down, and we would rather have a more conservative safe withdrawal rate in order to have consistency and predictability. This isn't something that we can just disregard flippantly.
And there's a lot of studies that show, because all of this is based on the Monte Carlo simulations.
Or the Trinity study.
Trinity study, Monte Carlo situation. And so a lot of them showed you could have negative money in retirement. You could have way more than you ever imagined in retirement.
But it's the failure rate. If Dave Ramsey's
it's the
8% over 30,
it's 48% or 60% failure rate.
It was at a point, it was over a 30-year time frame, but there was a high failure rate. And it's like, do you want to give that to a 50-50 coin flip of failing that? assuming you keep your expenses at 8% adjusted for inflation every year beginning the first year. The other thing is that if you have a few bad years initially, it's almost 100%
sequence of risk
wage.
return.
Or sequence of returns risk. The thing that blows my mind here is George is aware of the counter arguments. This is good news.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. And I think realistically, people adjust lifestyle depending on market conditions. And so that's why I think what Dave was saying was there's a lot of hope stealers out there who are like, if you don't have $2 million, you're screwed because you have to do 4%. If you don't do that, you're screwed. What Dave's saying is you're going to be okay. If you have no debt and $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in retirement, you're going to have a fine life and you can withdraw more than 4%.
But if we're counting on 8% being realistic and we go to a financial advisor, if we decide to use a financial professional for a retirement and they say, yeah, 8% withdrawal rates just don't exist in the reality that we have if we're going to utilize traditional rebalancing of your portfolio or invest in all equities as Dave recommends, and you end up feeling like you're going to have this great lifestyle and then are crushed by the fact that you don't. It's that to me is unfortunate.
Dave talked to you at all about this after the call? Because it seemed like he said, if George said something like that, we're going to take the video down.
Oh, yeah. Well, the producer talked to him. He was like, hey, the caller took that out of context maliciously.
I don't think I took George out of context. If you followed me since the November thing, you know that I, honest to goodness, care about you. I care about the people who listen to Dave, and I care about Dave Ramsey. I want people to recognize and realize the statistical undue risk they're exposed to if they believe, if they have a false hope in this 8% safe withdrawal rate stuff. In George's video, his original video, and I've shown it, I've talked about it before, had a citation from honestmath.com that talked about 30-year time horizons. 30-year time horizons are applicable whether or not we retire at age 30 to age 60, or from age 60 to age 90. 30 years is 30 years no matter how you shake it. Now that's what George's citation from honestmath.com explicitly said. I've been clear on that in my reaction videos before. What I don't think I've mentioned on this podcast before is Dave Ramsey's team, the producer, called me back twice after I hung up, because I hung up after Dave's rant ended. I didn't expect anyone wanted to talk to me. He called me back and asked, not about the name of the article that got taken down, but the name of George's video. And I had it in front of me. I gave him the title of the video. And the producer explained to me that George wasn't saying that we took out 3%. He was saying that that's what the FIRE community does. He was just talking about FIRE. He wasn't giving any recommendation around FIRE. To the contrary, and I explained this to the producer, I said, in George's video, he said that the FIRE movement typically totes 4% for their basis of decision making. And George's video was arguably making points against FIRE, reasons why the FIRE movement is not for you. And one of those is that 4% is too aggressive. He says to go 3%. And I said that 3% was for a 30-year time horizon, which is not exclusively applicable to FIRE. It is logically inconsistent for Ramsey Solutions to accept a study from honestmath.com that is, in my opinion, very conservative, say this applies to FIRE, and then go the total opposite direction when it comes to their stuff and say it's not applicable to a traditional retirement as we understand it.
What George actually said, and Dave was like, "Oh, okay, cool," and moved on with this day. But no, we didn't
crazy
have
on Twitter because we know this.
The financial community blew up over this.
The day before posting our Dave Ramsey video, this blew up on Twitter, and I was texting Jack. I'm like, dude, you see this stuff going down on Twitter? Tens of millions of views. Everyone is posting memes of like Dave Ramsey with like Lambos and this luxury lifestyle.
Oh my
gosh! Like withdrawing 8%.
That's hilarious.
It was hilarious.
Well, the financial community for a long time has loved to use Dave as a punching bag for clicks and views.
If you disagree with Dave and you make it publicly known and you have good grounds for it, you're not using Dave as a punching bag. Using Dave as a punching bag is not the goal. And using Dave for clicks and views is not the goal. Seeking out the truth through this controversy for the good of everyone is the goal. And to dismiss criticism by saying that you're looking for clicks and views is disingenuous and avoiding addressing the concern of the argument.
In the same clip, Dave has helped millions of people, and these people are in their mom's basement with their, they just became financial advisors and they have an opinion, and they've helped almost nobody. And so I get why they're railing against it, and their job is to, be financial advisors and do whatever the financial community does.
If the financial community and financial advisors are telling you that the advice that you're putting out on the radio, on the regular, is so risky and unrealistic that it is doing more harm than good, then you can't dismiss it as financial advisors are going to be financial advisors. And I think it might be a little condescending to say that financial advisors who may or may not have a lot of experience haven't helped anyone yet in comparison to Dave. If someone is young and they are motivated to help people, I think that should be praised instead of chastised. And I think we're going to leave it there. But I want to try to leave on a hopeful note, though. George has very clearly been exposed to sequence of returns risk arguments. He's seen the stuff that blew up on Twitter. He may not think very much of me anymore. He, didn't know I existed before this call for sure, but I'm afraid that my name, if it's known, is a swear word now at Ramsey Solutions, and, that's fine. But to publicly say that my intentions are malicious, I think is inappropriate. And I hope that maybe we can reconcile this and move forward with a sense of forgiveness. I commented on this video and asked for as much. I'm not going to lie, my feelings were a little hurt to see that because I looked up to Dave and George, and I like George. And I don't want to be made out to be the villain here because I tried to do what I thought was right. I ran a little bit of a poll on the community page on YouTube, and I'll have Amanda put the results here so that you can see them if you have the video. And if you haven't gone to our YouTube channel, you might be able to find the poll on the community page. But I basically asked, what to you are the results of George's response here? And there were some good comments, some good feedback that I saw before recording this. One of which was to recognize that George wants to keep his job, and he's playing a very careful political line where he's not going to in turn throw Dave under the bus publicly, and I respect that, I do. But I also think that he recognizes the reality of the situation when it comes to safe withdrawal rates and the truthfulness and the reality of the math that goes into those studies. So there's potential between George and Rachel that Ramsey Solutions modifies and updates its safe withdrawal rate advice or recommendation that's given on the radio. And I think that is good. But given the way that George is responding here, tells me that Dave is very rigid and not going to change his mind before he retires. So making a change before he says goodbye to Ramsey Solutions and doing the Ramsey show is probably a lost cause. I don't plan on doing anything more to try to change Dave's mind specifically. I think it's important to still reach you, those of you who are out there who might otherwise not know about the back check studies like the Trinity study and Monte Carlo simulations that can give you some statistical understanding of what your nest egg might do with your retirement plan so that we can be frugal and minimize our exposure to undue risk. I don't want us to demonize financial advisors who are simply doing their job, and I don't want us to demonize Dave for being on the wrong side of the colored dress and having some experience that has led him to fully and thoroughly denying anything more conservative than 8%. I'm going to continue making content that focuses on retirement and how we can best understand our retirement plan because I think it's so valuable. I think it's important, and I think it's something that you, if you're listening, are interested in. And I'm going to sprinkle those in throughout the year. But 2024 is going to be a year where I focus on the holistic plan for our personal finances. I'm going to try to focus on what I call the HopeFilled financial footsteps. You know, I've been a Dave Ramsey follower. I believed in the baby steps to a T. I've had some experiences that have led me to realize that there's some changes that could be made to update them in order to make the best plan for all of you. And I called the 8 steps in my plan the HopeFilled financial footsteps. I want you to think of them as the baby steps all grown up. I'm very excited to share those with you next week. So until then, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your HopeFilled financial future.